Welcome to the Success Pick and Mix podcast. I'm your host, Nicky Raby, a professional pick and mixer. I'm a personal brand coach, a speaker, an actor, a creator, and a podcaster. I'm on a mission to help you find and create your version of success. Your pick and mix of life and business on your terms. A blend that complements your personality, your goals, and your circumstances. Since 2018, I've been sharing interviews and mini episodes to help you unlock your next step, to make it real and make it happen. Round here, we dream big. We go for the ideal version. We talk about money and make moves our future selves would be proud of. This podcast is free and available for you whenever you need it. So do rate, review, and subscribe for new episodes. If you want to go deeper with my support, check out my freebies house and unlock the rooms you choose. nickyraby.com/freebies house. I also have workshops, programs, and one-on-one bespoke offerings. For prices and availability, go to nickyraby.com. Thank you, as always, for spending some time with me and my guests. Now, on to today's episode. In today's episode, I'm talking to Dr. Emma Svanberg, who is a clinical psychologist supporting women and their partners through pregnancy, birth, and parenthood. She's also a qualified hypnobirth teacher and runs a number of free groups in North London for parents and parents-to-be. She shares her ideas about the psychology of parenting on social media and has run a number of campaigns to raise awareness of common mental health issues facing parents. Oh, it's so refreshing to speak to someone like Emma. To know that support is out there is just wonderful. So if you're struggling or finding things tricky in any shape or form, I hope you find this episode really reassuring to know that the help is out there to do whatever it is that you need it to do. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, Emma. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Nikki. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. So, if people don't know you, tell me a little bit about what you do and who you are. We'd love that.
So, I am Dr. Emma Svanberg officially. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm also a hypnobirthing teacher. And I specialise in the perinatal period. So, what that means is that I tend to see women and their partners during pregnancy, around birth, following birth, and usually up to about the first 5 years of parenthood. So I see people for therapy, both individually and sometimes as a couple or as a family. And I also run a number of different groups. So I run a local group in North London called The Village, which is a kind of supportive group for local parents. I'm also part of the Positive Birth Movement, which was founded by Millie Hill. And that is a free group that I run once a month to talk about birth in a positive way, whatever that means to you. And at the moment, I'm also involved in running a few different campaigns. So I started my kind of social media I started a blog about 6 years ago and then started getting a bit more active on Instagram and Facebook. And as part of that, I'm currently doing a campaign called Make Birth Better, which is about raising awareness of birth trauma. So those are all of the different I do. I also work one day in the NHS. I should mention that because that's actually also a really important part of the work that I do.
Fantastic. I love that you have such a wide range, but they're all sort of the same flavour, but that you can work and be accessible in many different ways. What first brought you to this kind of work?
Oh, that's a long story. So my dad is actually also a psychologist, and he became very interested in attachment theory when I was a teenager. And he started learning how to kind of assess attachment between a parent and their infant. And he did a lot of that work at home. So that was something that I kind of saw him doing in the living room in the evenings. And it's just a really fascinating relationship, that kind of growing relationship between a parent and their infant, because it's such a time of change. It's such a transformative time, and it's a very interesting time psychologically, because actually it's a point at which you can do quite a little bit of work with somebody to have a really big impact. And for a long time, I thought, I'm definitely not going to be a psychologist. I definitely don't want to follow my dad's footsteps. And I started doing an English degree and thought, no, definitely not going to do that. But and then ended up it was just always such a fascination of mine. It's always been something that I'm very interested in. You can sort of imagine the conversations that we would have had around the dinner table. So it's kind of always been part of my life, let's say. And then because of my own interests, I've always been very interested in feminism and women's rights. And I think that my kind of journey's taken me more towards thinking about how women experience becoming mothers, particularly in our kind of current sort of social climate, what that feels like. And thinking about things like how your identity changes, how your working life changes, how your relationship changes. So that's sort of where I've ended up kind of specialising, let's say. But yeah, so generally that time of transition has been a big interest of mine, sort of always, for as long as I can remember. And then particularly that kind of the development of the relationship between a parent and their infant is something that I've always been kind of, very fascinated by. So it was almost inevitable, let's say.
Yes, but if your dad had said, right, this is what you must do, like with all our parents, we have to find our own journey, that suddenly you're like, okay, it feels right to me, I'm going to go for it. That transition into motherhood is absolutely huge from every angle, and certainly from my own experience, I remember there being such an emphasis on the baby, the baby that you were carrying, that you had to keep warm and cozy and well fed and sleep and all of the pressures. But what I didn't realize during the pregnancy was the impact that it would have on me as a person, and what tools that I needed to help myself move into that transition. I think there's so much pressure about what the nursery is going to look like, or what kind of buggy you're going to have. And actually I didn't anticipate, and I'll be very honest that I didn't probably financially budget for myself in that whole mix. That you mentioned the small wins there of, the very little changes can make a huge impact. Having a hot shower and some lovely facial oil on your face, it does wonders, or a lick of mascara. If people are listening, and it may be in this moment, what are some of the common themes that come up in your work?
Oh, common themes are exactly as you describe, actually, that sense of no longer just being a me. You suddenly become an us, and often people don't really talk about how you're feeling about it. They'll ask about the baby, they'll ask about how the baby's sleeping, how they're feeding, and it's very rare for somebody to say, particularly to a mum, but also to a dad or a partner, how are you dealing with it all? And I think we don't really talk enough about how much every single part of your life changes. So you go from being a kind of independent, fully functioning adult, you're probably at work, you have a social life, you've got friends around you, you've got your family potentially around you, or maybe a bit further afield. And suddenly all of those relationships change, your day-to-day routine changes, what you're interested in changes. So I think that, just being able to anticipate that it is going to be a time of tremendous transformation can really help you just negotiate that and give yourself enough time, because actually that's what it's all about. It's just giving yourself the time to let it all settle again, and then think about, well, okay, now that I have this new little person in my life, who am I going to be? How do I feel? Your identity does change such a lot that you almost need to go through that process, a bit like what we do as teenagers. You go through that process again of almost discovering who you are as a parent, and having this extra person around. But I would say for anyone sort of going through it at the moment, like I said, I think the key thing is just give yourself time. You don't know what you're doing yet, and why should you? For most of us, it's often the first time that we've ever even held a baby. So, just allowing yourself the time, as you would in any other kind of new situation, just to feel out of your depth for a little while and anticipate that. And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. That's something that often we're really bad at, just being able to say, do you know what, I'm really not coping very well and I could do with an extra pair of hands.
Yes, because for some reason help is seen as such a weakness of,
Yeah.
if I ask for help, then I'm clearly not coping, or everybody else seems to have got this figured out. And sometimes, if somebody wants to help you, take it, because it's a great thing. In terms of the practical steps that people can do, one thing that I noticed was that, of course, my day-to-day and my hours were consumed by taking care of a small human. But actually, I had a lot of time to think, because never before had I been up so much in the night, seeing all hours of the day, or, walking around a park. And my little boy is just over 2 now, so we have detailed conversations every day. But in the early days, you're not necessarily getting that feedback from your child. And I know that I reached a point, maybe when Oscar was about 15, 16 months, that I almost felt like my head could combust, and some of the information had to come out. And so one thing that I realized was that I needed to let that out. And I realized that throughout lots of my life I'd been distracted, perhaps, or I was able to distract myself. So you can get busy, or you can go out and you've had a rough week, so you can go and have some wines at the weekend with your friends, whatever. Whereas when you're in that new mum sort of phase, it's all singing, all dancing, and it's all consuming every single day. So I felt like I had to almost get rid of some of the stuff from my head in some kind of way. What would you say to people in that new phase of, or maybe even a few more months down the line, that are feeling just a bit overwhelmed and consumed by the day-to-day kind of relentlessness, I guess, of it? There's so much joy, of course, but sometimes you don't want to wipe the floor, or you don't want to get up in the middle of the night. And just because you love your baby doesn't necessarily mean that is easy.
No, absolutely. And I think that is really important, what you've just said, is that even though actually some of these things are things that we do have to do, you do have to get up in the middle of the night if you've got a hungry baby, but that doesn't mean that you're going to want to do it all the time. And that's okay. In the same way that we actually, some mornings we might get up and really not want to go to work. Of course, there are going to be some moments with a child that you just don't feel like mothering, and that's okay, and it's completely normal to feel that way sometimes. There's such a myth around that being a mother means that we should be full of joy all the time, and that we should enjoy every moment. That's such a phrase that you hear all the time. And if you're not enjoying it, or if there's actually sometimes when you really can't stand it and you're resenting it and you're desperate for a moment to yourself, then it's very hard to talk about it if you feel like you're supposed to be feeling joyful all the time. So I'd say the first thing to do is to talk about it. And it may be that it's hard to talk to somebody that you know about it, because you might feel a bit guilty about having those kind of feelings. And there are so many different avenues to express those kinds of thoughts and feelings. And that might be on social media. I think that the Instagram and Facebook communities are such a brilliant resource for parents. They're places where you can, virtually anonymously sometimes, if you want to, be able to talk about the kind of ups and downs of parenting.
Yes.
But also don't be afraid
to it never closes, isn't it? Instagram.
Yes.
It's always available, which
and
is great.
Somebody awake at 2:00 in the morning.
Yes.
So, there's often you will find somebody on there who is also feed a baby at 3:00 and feeling like they're going to tear their hair out. And, at least you can share that experience with somebody. But also do talk to your health visitor about it, or to your GP about it. And sometimes you might try and talk to a health visitor and a GP, and occasionally you don't find somebody who's receptive. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be somebody else who is really happy to listen to you. So I think sometimes people get really put off by going to see, let's say, a GP who's just having a bit of a bad day and just isn't kind of quite aware enough to pick up on what you're saying at that point in time. So don't let that put you off. Just try a different GP or a different health visitor, because it is really important that we do talk about these things. And even if they're kind of absolutely in the normal spectrum and you're just having a bad day, being able to share that with somebody, just to even hear, I feel like that sometimes too, and it's okay. and just to be able to get that bit of kind of emotional support. But having said
sigh of relief, then that's so key, isn't it? Just somebody else saying, "Oh yes, me too. I felt like that as well."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you feel like it is really affecting your sort of day-to-day functioning, then I think it's really important that you go and speak to your GP about it, because often we can just feel like that has become our new normal, and we kind of lose sight of how we did feel before, and that maybe this isn't our kind of normal way of functioning or of handling things. So in that kind of circumstance, then it is really important that you go and seek some help and seek some support. Often people are very worried about talking to their GP because, you know, they feel like, well, what if I tell my GP and he thinks actually there really is something wrong with me? And what if they call social services? And maybe they'll think that I'm not fit to look after my baby. So those kind of fears and the stigma around kind of mental health can really stop people from seeking support. But if that is something that you're worried about, I would say, you know, it's worth talking to somebody about it, and then together being able to think about what might be the kind of best next step, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yes. And just reaching out can do wonders, because actually even, you know, having a cup of tea with somebody, you can actually go away and think, well, I do actually have more options than I thought I did, or there's a light at the end of the tunnel, or we're so fragile in those, you know. I think I still feel I'm in that. I don't think you ever truly get over it sometimes.
No, I think it's the first 2 years absolutely are a time when you're still going through that transition. I would say it takes at least 2 years to be able to start to feel kind of confident in your parenting and feel like you've kind of, you know, found your new identity. And often you might have gone back to work at that point, so being able to kind of juggle what that feels like. But also being able to talk about it if you are feeling overwhelmed means that you might be able to get some practical help too. And that, again, you know, is something that is really important, particularly for new parents, when, you know, as you said, that word relentless is such a perfect word for it, because it's such a time of, it's a kind of weird mix, isn't it, of boredom and anxiety.
Yes.
So you can feel really quite bored and quite isolated and quite lonely, but while also feeling very, very anxious and quite agitated. So, you know, just being able to have somebody say, look, let me hold the baby for half an hour, you just go and have a bit of time off just to kind of reset yourself, can make such a huge difference to your mental state.
Absolutely, that support is key. And one thing that really helped me was just sitting in other people's living rooms, not sitting in my own. And I know there can be that pressure of like, is your child have they learned their first instrument yet, or are they doing this? And I just thought, oh no, I just like to sit on somebody else's sofa. That would be lovely, and just have a moment. Instagram is a wonderful community, but sometimes for my clients who come to me and are figuring out that next step of perhaps starting a business or looking at different work and career options, sometimes it can feel like everybody else has got it figured out. Everybody is starting a new business from the labour ward, and, you know, they're being a woman in business and doing all of this. And I actually do turn away clients. I sometimes get clients who are 38, 39 weeks pregnant, and they say, I really want to launch a business when I'm on my maternity leave, because I'm worried that I'm going to have too much time on my hands. And I sort of say, have your baby and come back to me, because you don't know what is around the corner. You know, let's get the baby out into the world. I'm saying it like I'm delivering it. I'm clearly not, but, you know, it's another skill I have.
That's the other thing to do at the weekend, Nicky.
Yeah, I've got so much free time on my hands, of course. But yeah, I would love to talk about that transition back into work, or perhaps looking at different options that are going to help a woman or a man navigate that transition again.
I think actually what you were just saying there about the pressure, I think what you're talking about there is the pressure that people feel to get back to work really quickly. And there's almost, I think the downside of social media is that there is almost now an expectation that you could create a business on your maternity leave. You know, it's don't just stop and, you know, kind of try and get through this transition and enjoy your baby. You've also got to be productive all the time. And I think that's very telling of the way that we view babies as a society and the way that we view parenthood, because actually that really does a huge disservice to the baby in some way, that the baby's just going to be around while you're then kind of setting up your your new business at your kitchen table.
Sleep on a sheepskin in the corner of the room.
Exactly, because that's obviously what they do, isn't it? They just going to sleep on an empire. But it really shows, I think, it really reflects how little understanding we have as a society about what a baby actually needs and how demanding a baby actually is and has to be. Because if we have those kind of expectations that we can create a business or, whatever it might be, people often talk about their friends saying when they're going on maternity leave, "Oh, you're going for a break." And actually, if we just were able to talk about the fact that maternity leave absolutely does not feel like a break, it feels like, a very different and sometimes very difficult time. And start to question kind of some of those expectations, because then when the baby does come along, you can be so shocked and surprised at how the kind of level of neediness that they show, that alone, I think, can make you feel like this isn't normal, this isn't what I expected. So I think it's quite a sort of dangerous myth, I guess, that's around that it's possible to do these things. I mean, of course, it is possible to do these things, but what you don't see on social media is all of the, the background, the blood, sweat and tears that might have gone into creating that business, and also the help that must have been around for somebody to be able to do that, and the kind of conflict and the negotiations that they've had to go through in order to achieve that. So I think it's what I really love about social media is all of the, the kind of Insta mums who are showing the other side of that. I love seeing the photos of people with their piles of laundry or, saying I'm still up and I'm still writing this and it's 2:00 in the morning and I know that the baby's going to be up in an hour. Just so that we're starting to break down that myth, that actually the idea that we can have it all and that it's all just going to be easy because it's all natural, that there is a bit of heartache that has to go into that if you're going to try and achieve all of those things.
And often I feel like something is always down, whether it's, I've landed a new fantastic opportunity, or I've got an acting job, or my child's learnt to walk, whatever it might be. But then behind the scenes, don't go in my kitchen because it's a right mess.
Exactly.
And, I think it's tricky sometimes, and I know sometimes my mum will come round and she'll go, "Gosh, I can't believe you've got dishes in your sink." And I think, yes, but I've only got 5 minutes spare and I've got to do this email. And I think that's the danger sometimes, is that because we can access our business from our phones, sometimes those lines of work and switching off are a little bit blurred. And I'd love to talk a bit more about maternal feminism and how that balance of the genders is moving in a new direction, and your thoughts on that, really.
Well, it's something that I am sort of learning about myself as time goes on, and partly something that I really came across when I became a mum myself. I think I've always questioned, I think, the idea of what motherhood is and how it's presented in our society, because I think motherhood is kind of presented in two different ways. There's either the kind of mum who is the kind of blessed mum myth, let's say, that the mum who is always joyful about her role as a mother, is always able to do everything that she is kind of trying to achieve, and then there's the opposite side of that, which is the struggling mum, the frazzled mum. And of course the reality for most of us is that we're kind of somewhere in between. Some days we're frazzled and some days we do feel blessed and we do feel lucky. And so the sort of feminism and its kind of role in thinking about those kind of presentations of women was something that I was very interested in. And then becoming a mum myself, actually what I was really surprised by was how much I struggled to give up my work identity. That's kind of why I started my blog, because I felt like I really needed something that made me feel like my brain was still taking over and that I still had things that I could, kind of get my teeth into intellectually, let's say. And then I came across a couple of different groups. So All Mothers Work and Mothers at Home Matter Too. And Mothers at Home Matter Too particularly is a group that I've become more involved in. They have a Facebook page and a website. And they also have, I think, yearly meetups, which I haven't yet managed to get along to. But the conversation that happens on those groups is really interesting and really thought-provoking because they sort of lobby to give women the right to choose whether or not they go back to work. So when I say work, I mean kind of having an income outside of the home usually, or working from home. But I suppose they really question the idea that we have to be economically productive in order to be kind of valuable human beings, let's say. So there is an idea that we have, from the kind of moment that we go to school, we are in a kind of 9 to 3 at school, and then there's an expectation that we're going to go into a 9 to 5. We're going to be kind of part of the hamster wheel of employment, and it's something that is really it's something that is really kind of within us, almost from throughout our education, throughout our kind of working life, that this is just something that we do. And we don't really question it, I think, often until we then leave that kind of environment and have to start thinking about whether we want life to look a little bit different. And I think for a lot of mums that I've spoken to, that point at which you stop being economically productive can feel very difficult because it's something that you've probably always done. You've always been kind of bringing in money, you've always been earning. So just being kind of financially dependent on somebody can feel very difficult. And then also the question about, well, if I do go back to work, or, how am I going to do that? In what capacity am I going to do that? So at the moment, they're lobbying the government to try and think about the ways in which women are discouraged from staying at home. So thinking about things like the childcare options. At the moment, the government are pushing for this kind of 30 hours of free childcare, which is very valuable for those parents who want it. But at the same time, they've taken away things like child tax credits for some families. So it's made it more difficult for parents who would like to stay at home to be at home. So it's just really kind of about, I guess, thinking about where we feel we are as mothers or as parents, and how that fits with our kind of working life, and really questioning, I suppose, the idea that we have to be in that kind of economically productive place that we might have been in before. Yeah, does that make sense, Nicky? Yeah. It's a complicated, it's very complicated sort of to try and explain it quickly, but hopefully that makes some sense.
It really does. And I think it's a great time actually once you've had a baby and you're sort of forced into reassessing things, because I think pre-motherhood, you can easily skip along and you think, oh, was this year or was it last year? And I guess we're too busy having a lovely time to really check in and be present and see what's going on underneath, or perhaps take that moment to be reflective about, is this what I want? Is this what this year is all about? Because I guess in your 20s, you just think that the life will go on forever and ever, and there is no urgency. And one thing becoming a mum did for me was it really shone a light on what my life was, what I wanted to be, and how I wanted to spend my time, and how I sort of, what I guess I needed to ask for, and in terms of my partner and my family, of how I could actually make this work and combine all the things, because it is possible, but also I would never pretend that it is a one-woman show by any means, and sometimes things do fall down and fall by the wayside. I would love to just finally talk a bit more about mental health and what tools people can use to make sure that they are not feeling overwhelmed and can keep doing the things that they love, but also understand that some days it will feel tougher than others.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think everybody sort of has to develop their own toolkit in many ways, and I often don't sort of say that there are particular tricks or tips that everybody can use, because it's such an individual thing. I think it's really important, even during pregnancy or before. I mean, it's always important whether you're pregnant, a mum, a dad, or not a parent. It's really important to just check in with yourself and think about how you feel, and be able to kind of monitor your mood, in order to be able to sort of look out for particular signs that you might be getting a bit overwhelmed or your mental health might be struggling a little bit. And I think part of the difficulty in doing that, particularly in the kind of age that we live in, is that we are often so kind of overwhelmed by tasks and by information. There's a lot of different opportunities that we have in life now to zone out. So we don't often just kind of stop and think about how we are. And, instead of doing that, we might scroll on our phone, or we might watch the TV, or anything that kind of means that we end up zoning out, and we don't then kind of check in at all. And I think that one of the easiest things to do is just to spend a bit of time in the morning and in the evening and just ask yourself the question, how am I doing today? What is it that I'm struggling with at the moment? Is there anything that I think that I could do, that I need some help with? And then think about what kind of things work for you. For some people, it might be going for a walk outside. For other people, actually, it might be just sitting on the sofa, snuggling up under a blanket and reading a book for a little while. Some people need to talk about it. Other people actually just need to have the time to process and reflect on their own. So I think in many ways it is about, often we can look to see what other people are doing and feel like, well, that person really gets a lot from going to a yoga class. That's what I should be doing as well. But actually, maybe your thing is going to be going for a run outdoors, or lifting some weights, or having sex, or, doing something very different. So it's about kind of figuring out what works for you as an individual, and not feeling like you need to do what everybody else is doing. And I would say that if you notice that you kind of feel like you're not coping, particularly if it's gone on for more than kind of 2 or 3 weeks, and you feel like every day is actually feeling very difficult, then, as I said before, do talk about it with somebody, whether that's a friend, or whether that's a health visitor, or that's your GP. I often get questions from people via Instagram and Facebook just saying, I've been feeling a bit like this. Do you think that that's a problem? Do you think that that's something that I could do with talking about? So I'm always happy for people to kind of contact me and just say, this is what's going on. What do you think? And then being able to kind of offer that opportunity to think about it together. And there's lots of other people like me who are quite happy to do that. So, my NHS job, I work in a primary care psychology service, and we have people who self-refer to us all the time. And often, actually, they just want to have a chat over the phone, and we'll do a kind of short assessment. And that might just give people ideas about the different things they might be able to try. So there are services out there. I know that services can sometimes feel really unobtainable, and you sometimes do need to kind of ask a couple of times, but there are a lot of people like me out there kind of happy to help and happy to listen.
Oh, thank goodness. Hey, thank goodness. Oh, that is amazing. Thank you. I know that will be so reassuring to people, because I know people listen to the podcast at all times of day and night, and may have been up at all times of day of night.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That is so brilliant as well, because often the media can paint this picture, rightly so in some ways, that our services are depleted. But so I think Emma's totally right. Just keep looking. If you're not finding what you need, don't assume that it's not out there. It will be, but
yes.
Yeah, you have to seek a little bit harder sometimes.
Sometimes you do, yes, and sometimes you might have to wait. But I always think, it's better to wait than not to ask at all. So it's not ideal. Ideally we would be seeing people within kind of 6 to 8 weeks. That is kind of the target, but it doesn't always happen. But even so, you are on somebody's radar. There is somebody thinking about you, and we do try and get to see people as quickly as we possibly can. And if you do feel like you're waiting a long time and you can't cope, then ask again. It's one of those kind of sad facts that the NHS is struggling at the moment, but the people who work there are there to help you. So if you feel like you can't wait, then do ask again. Don't be afraid to kind of go back if you feel like you need to.
So I would love to talk about your birth trauma campaign, and for you to share with us why you set it up, and what it's going to look like, or what it does look like.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you about that, Nikki, because it's something that I'm working on a lot at the moment. So last summer, there's a week, Birth Trauma Awareness Week, that is set up by the Birth Trauma Association. And during that week, I did a post on Instagram about the difference between PTSD after birth and postnatal depression, because people who've had a difficult birth experience are often misdiagnosed with postnatal depression, and then not necessarily their kind of trauma is not necessarily picked up on. And when I did that post, I was absolutely floored by the number of responses that I got from women and their partners who said, do you know what, I think that this might have happened to me. I'm still really struggling with thinking about the birth of my child. You know, even if it was 2 years ago, one woman, it was 18 years ago. And, you know, just being able to see the kind of volume of responses that I got from people who were still very much feeling affected by their births. And so as a result, what I did over the course of that week was I asked people to send me their birth stories, and I then analysed them and kind of pulled out the major themes that came through from those stories. And a lot of them were kind of centred around the influence of the people around you while you're giving birth, you know, the midwives, the doctors, your birth partner, but also all of those kind of other people, like you might have had your mum around or a doula, and how influential those people are. And I think what's really important to kind of note about it was actually that it doesn't really matter so much what kind of birth you had. You know, people can have birth which has a lot of different interventions. You can have a birth that goes into a kind of emergency situation. But if you felt supported and if you felt like things were properly explained to you, actually it's much less likely that you'll come out of that experience feeling traumatized than if you could have had a very straightforward delivery, but actually because people were disrespectful or did things without you feeling like you consented to them, that is something that can stay with you for a very long time.
Gosh, that's so true, actually, because I anticipated that I would, maybe the naivety of a first-time mum, that I would have this glorious Glastonbury experience where I'd be in water with dolphin music and just, you know, breathing my way through it. And I didn't have that experience at all. I had a very heavy baby. He was nearly 10 pounds. I'm only 5'2".
Oh,
so
right.
he was this chunkster. You know, he came up when he was born. He looked like he had a career. Like, just go to work, guys. You know, he just looked ready for the world. He was cooked well and truly. But it had a huge impact on my back, and I had to have acupuncture in the last sort of few weeks of my pregnancy, just because it was my whole balance and everything was really tricky. And actually, I was so focused on the birth centre and not being on the labour ward and no intervention and all of this. But actually, once they said the baby needs to come out, we are going to do an emergency C-section at this point, that's when everything became much better. And that's when I felt like I had the best team, because there were several moments where I had 10 midwives in the room. I don't want to frighten anybody or, you know, share a bad birth story, but just, you know, in these sort of things I wasn't anticipating. I had 10 midwives in the room, and they were all talking over me, and they were trying to put the epidural in, and I had to have a reel, and I felt like such a diva at the moment, saying, please could everybody just be quiet, because I can't hear what she's saying, and because my back is out of sync, she needs to put it in the right place.
Right, absolutely.
And just having that power yourself of saying, oh, actually, I'm not being dramatic or over the top. I'm simply saying what I need to have in this moment.
Yes, and I think what's very tricky for a lot of people is actually that they don't feel able to be vocal. And that might be because actually physiologically, when we're giving birth, what should happen is that our frontal lobes switch off, and we're not actually then able to kind of process. You know, we just lose the capacity to be able to kind of verbalize what we're thinking and feeling. Yes. And that's something that should happen, you know, during the normal birth process. We sort of lose the ability to do that a little bit. But if then something is happening that you don't feel happy about and you're not able to say that, then you can end up feeling very powerless. And, you know, we shouldn't be in the position, I believe, we shouldn't be in the position during birth where we do need to speak out, actually, the people around us. And often people are, you know, I don't want to disparage any midwives or doctors, because they are working so very, very hard.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But at the same time, because of the way that sometimes our services work, people are overstretched, they're busy for whatever reason. Actually, they're not always able to be as compassionate as somebody needs while they're giving birth. And, I really believe that we shouldn't be in a position where we do need to speak up. We should be in a position where we're being listened to, we're being heard as a matter of course. So really where the campaign has gone is that at the moment what I'm trying to do is set up a website, and if people are interested they can go and have a look at it. It's makebirthbetter.org, and what I'd really like to do on there is to have listed all of the services that work with women and their partners who've experienced a difficult birth. And I'm asking people to kind of just add themselves to a shared spreadsheet that then uploads to a map. So if anyone who's listening knows of a service or is working with women or their partners following a difficult birth, then please do go onto the website and add yourself. What I'd love to have is for a woman, wherever she is around the country, to be able to go onto the website and just see whether there's somebody in her area who can support her in dealing with the feelings that she might be having or that her partner might be having following a difficult birth experience. And there's lots of other things that will kind of come over the course, hopefully, of the next year with the campaign. I'm hoping to add things to the website to be able to support professionals, and also to be able to have something on there for dads, and also for pregnant women to be able to go on there and learn about the things that they might be able to do in order to help them have a more positive birth experience.
Fantastic. And actually there's no perfect way to do it, right or wrong. It's
Exactly.
about your experience and
that is so important, Nicky. It's about your experience and what's important to you. And actually that is the way that things are headed in terms of policy. There's a big programme going on at the moment through the NHS Maternity Transformation Programme. And one of the key elements of that is that women should have personalised care and continuity of care, because actually all of the studies show that what is one of the most significant factors affecting outcomes is that you knew the person who was going to be with you during your birth. So having a midwife who's with you, through pregnancy, through the birth, comes to see you afterwards, is, time and time again has been shown to really affect women's experience of birth. And also not just their sort of psychological experience, but their outcomes, because a midwife who knows you is much more likely to pick up on something that isn't going quite right.
Oh, that makes me so emotional just hearing that. Don't feel like you're alone, anybody. There are brilliant people out there doing great things like Emma, so thank you.
There's a huge community, actually. There's a big community that I'm tapping into on Twitter. There's a lot of people working very hard to try and improve women's experience of birth. And if you'd like to share your story, if you've had a birth experience that you'd like to share, then there is also an option on the website to share your story, and I'd love to hear them. So please do feel free to send them my way if you'd like to.
Wonderful. And we will share all the links on my website as well. So even if however further down the line that you're listening to if you're not listening to it live, they will all remain on there as well.
Oh, lovely. Thanks, Nicky.
Of course, absolutely. If people want to find out more about you and your brilliant blog and services, where should they go?
Well, Instagram is probably where I'm the most active, because I love looking at everyone's photos.
And I like saying active because often when I'm on Instagram, I'm sitting. I'm not doing any physical activity.
It's where I'm most mentally active. So I am on Instagram at Mumologist, which is MUMOLOGIST. I'm also on Facebook as The Mumologist. And you can also look at my website, which is www.mumologist.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know that this is going to be hugely helpful for so many people. So thank you for everything that you do.
Oh, thank you for having me, Nicky.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Emma has provided me with lots of links that will be really helpful. So you can find them all on the show notes, nickyraby.com/podcast. Also, I'm sure there'll be a thriving conversation over on social media. Instagram is always a good place to start at Nicky Raby. And also, if you want to find out more about how we can work together, I do one-on-one sessions, I have online courses, or I do small group workshops. So come over to nickyraby.com/coaching. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend, even if that friend has perhaps not asked you for it, or you may feel like they're struggling and may need a bit of support. This is why I make this podcast. I want it to reach as many people as possible. Thanks as always for your support, and I will see you very soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear what you thought of the episode and share any takeaways with me. Come and find me across social media at Nicky Raby, or you can visit the podcast page, nickyraby.com/podcast.